Welcome to episode 8 of the Practice Squad, a show where we talk about football and make the replacement refs look like pros. I'm your host and fourth string quarterback Jeremy, joined each and every week by my co-host and backup long snapper Joseph. How's it going, man?
Good. Had a good week this week.
Yeah?
Big butt. 12 and 2, I think.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that. I'm jealous. So we're live right here on YouTube each and every week at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, right after Monday Night Football. If you're tired of the punditry or just want a fresh voice, come listen to a couple random dudes talk about football and have a good time. This week we've got a recap of this week's games, a continuation of our top 10 series, talking about the poopy 49ers, lots of awesome discussions, and as always, to close our show, our predictions. So there's a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive right in to our Week 7 recap. Bengals at Chiefs was our decided upon game of the week. Man, what a stinky primetime game. So the first half was decently competitive. I mean, at halftime, the Bengals were still in it. They would have needed to step it up, but they were still in it. The second half just got wildly out of control. Two special teams / defensive touchdowns, just gross play. Honestly, I thought this game was going to be more of a shootout, like a more evenly matched shootout. But yeah, no. My main thoughts about this game were, so first of all, did you know that the Niners-Rams game was flexed out of primetime for this game?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so the Rams at Niners was supposed to play last night in the primetime slot. And they flexed it out because of CJ Beathard. And
Are you being serious?
Yeah, no, I'm dead serious. They flexed it out, and they flexed in Bengals at Chiefs, which obviously you and I picked it as the game of the week to watch, so of course we thought it was going to be good. But in retrospect, that game was on par with how bad the Niners-Rams game was. So
it was exciting, though. I mean, it was exciting to watch how good the Chiefs are, I would say. But as a game as a whole, yeah, the Bengals weren't very competitive, but the Chiefs were fun to watch.
Yeah. And I guess if you're a more of a national football fan, watching the Rams be good would have been fun as well, especially Aaron Donald. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So Dalton wasn't very good. He had like a 50% completion, 148 yards, only one touchdown and a pick. Mahomes was great, as always. Really good completion percentage, 350 yards, 4 touchdowns, only one pick. Man, Travis Kelce is a really good tight end. He's really, I don't know how many years he's been in the league, but he's just really been coming into his own these last couple of years.
I think 4-ish.
4? Okay.
But that, I mean, how about Sammy Watkins is looking better?
Yeah.
You know? And Tyreek Hill is, well, he forgot to learn physics. You know, there was a few times he failed his physics lesson, but other than that, he was amazing. And then, what's his first? Kareem Hunt. A mixture of Walter Payton and Barry Sanders, elusive like Sanders, and then just breaking. He couldn't be tackled yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, he could not be tackled. So very exciting to watch that prolific offense. It's head up by Patrick Mahomes,
Not just prolific, but explosive.
That's right, explosive and prolific. But they look good, man. I mean, so Mahomes is really smart. Like, you can just tell he did just these small instances, but with great intelligence. Like that one play near the goal line, like the 8-yard line, and he's running towards the outside, and he fakes the throw, and then makes like that awkward throw to Kareem Hunt, but like perfect timing for the touchdown. I mean, that was a very intelligent move. And then there was one throw, I think in the third quarter, where he gets hit by, I think it's Michael Johnson. He grabs his like arm or shoulder, and he still throws the ball to down the field for a big play. There was just a lot of big plays in that game, and Mahomes was consistently good. He looks nimble like Russell Wilson, but still has a good arm and looks to be reading defenses and intelligence like Peyton Manning. So I'm hoping it's a consistency for the rest of his career. He's got a bright career ahead of him. And Kareem Hunt is, I mean, it's only this is his second year, right? Last year was his great rookie year.
Yeah.
So Kareem Hunt, Mahomes are all starting out great careers. And I think Tyreek Hill has only been in the league a few years as well. So bright future for the Chiefs.
Yeah,
and the
Mahomes really knows how to make plays out of nothing, and like really devastating plays out of nothing too. He reminds me a lot of Russell Wilson. It's really scary, actually.
I think you missed my walrus comment there. Andy Reid.
What did you say?
The walrus. They're looking good future for them and the walrus.
Them and the walrus.
Yeah.
I've always believed in the walrus.
He's been solid. He's had a good career with the Chiefs so far, and I always forget. I always get him mixed up. He was with the Packers before, right? I always get him and the other guy.
No, I don't think he was ever with the Packers. Was he? If he was, it was a long time ago.
Or was he? I'm gonna look it up. Or was it the Seahawks? I can't remember. You keep talking.
Andy Reid.
Yeah, Andy Reid's like main team. Who's?
Well, I mean, I know he's 4,000 years old, but I don't think he was ever with the Seahawks. Well, you'll find it out.
Packers. Yeah, so he was.
When was he with the Packers?
Never mind. Not very. Oh no, duh. This is. You know what? I apologize to the listeners. I should know better. I was getting him and I think Montgomery mixed up. The Eagles. He was the Eagles coach for 13 years. That's where he's from.
Yeah.
So he did coach the Packers offensive line.
He was the coach for the Eagles, and then they got Chip Kelly, right?
Yes.
For like 2 years or 3 years.
That sounds right. So he's been the Chiefs head coach since 2013. So he was the Eagles coach. Now I'm curious. I'm gonna look up the Packers coach. Keep going.
The Packers coach is.
But from before the famous Packers coaches.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, so Bengals D was really disappointing. They're supposed to be a good unit, and they played terribly. But then again, pretty much the Kansas City offense is making every defense look terrible. So, so an interesting thing happened in that game, and this is another rules thing. I like to pick up on unique rule situations in games because it keeps games that for me are otherwise uninteresting interesting. Because every football game is different. And in this game, there was a kickoff, and the ball landed short. It was short of the goal line, so it wasn't a touchback. And the ball landed inbounds, and it rolled to within an inch or two of the sideline. And a Bengals receiver was out of bounds, right near the ball. The ball stopped rolling, inbounds. The Bengals receiver was out of bounds, and he picked up the ball. And him picking up the ball made the kick count as a technical out-of-bounds kick, which is a penalty that makes the ball start at the 40. I had no idea you could do that. The commentators were, saying, oh, how genius the receiver was for picking up the ball. And given that that's the rule, that was genius, right? But I had no idea that you could be out of bounds to grab a ball that's inbounds and then have it count as an out of bounds ball on a kickoff.
Yeah, I thought he'd be dead. He'd be like a dead player.
Yeah, either that or that he would get a penalty for being out of bounds and being the first person to touch the ball.
Yeah.
Which is normally what happens, right? If you go out of bounds and then you come back inbounds and you're the first player to touch the ball, then that's a penalty. You can't do that. But in this case, he stayed out of bounds and then picked it up and created the kickoff penalty. So that was interesting. I'd never, ever seen that before. Maybe we'll never see that again because that's like a rare situation for a kickoff to stop rolling in bounds close enough for someone to pick it up. So yeah, I mean, do you have anything else to say about this game? I mean, honestly, it just really wasn't that interesting to me. It showed some of the Bengals' flaws. It showed that the Chiefs are for real. They're going to be in the NFC Championship. I mean, what else is there really to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's really looking like them and probably the Patriots. So, but yeah, this year I think if they can get that number 1 seed, I mean, they could beat the Patriots. I mean, they had a good game against them in Foxborough, so I see them keep getting hotter this
Yeah,
season.
it
So
might just come down to whoever gets the number one.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move into our second segment, our weekly 49ers Dolphins check-in. So we're going to start this week with the Dolphins. The game was Detroit Lions at Miami Dolphins. And I think this was was this your first
home loss?
Home loss?
Yeah.
Of the season? Okay. So walk us through your impressions of this game.
Well, first, since I was so distracted, I just have to let the viewers know who I was speaking of for the Packers coach. So, Mike Holmgren, he was the Packers head coach for 6 years, but no, he looks like Andy Reid. He was the Seahawks coach for so many years. So I had to do that. You know me, once I get focused on something, I got to bring it up. All right. But I could also really not care about Miami right now that much. Maybe I'm not focused. Miami blew it. Offensive line was bad. The run game was okay. Kenyon Drake I thought he played decent. Osweiler is just weak. Didn't have good pocket protection, but just he's weak out there. And we could just not stop the Bengals. And they just had several big plays.
The Lions.
And I'm sorry, the Bengals. For some reason I was thinking of
you probably would have been able to stop the Bengals because they were so bad. But
well, for how bad they were this week, yeah. But for the previous weeks, probably not. But yeah, Matthew Stafford, if you watched it, he had a lot of angst in that game, like in a positive way. I mean, he was out there firing, and we just could not stop them. Our defense was pathetic, and I know that there's probably a lot more to analyze to that, but I've been saying the same thing pretty much all season long. Nothing was really different in this game. So if you have more to add, feel free. But it's really embarrassing even to watch again, and the score does not reflect how close it was not. If that makes sense. It was not that close. 32-21 was the score, but it was not that close in performance.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing was that you guys actually were in the game until about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, but because of the way you played, it sort of made you feel like you were never in it. And I predicted this last week with Osweiler's sort of his dink and dunk game, that he can't throw deep, so he throws those short screen passes, and that was your offense last week, and he got like 300 something yards with it. This week, I predicted his numbers would go down because defenses would plan for it, and lo and behold, they did. The Lions forced him out of that game. They forced him to throw deep a lot of times, and between way overthrown balls and receivers that kept dropping balls, the deep game just wasn't there for you guys. Yeah. So he was still decently efficient, but he had only 240 yards. He did have a couple of touchdowns, no picks. So on the stat sheet makes it look like a very careful, decent game, but he actually looked pretty bad out there.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I don't know what's going on with the wide receivers and the drops, and I just think there's not really much chemistry with him. And granted, he's only had the 2 starts this season, and I think right now, given Tannehill's seemingly bad headspace right now, that Osweiler's probably still the better choice. But he's not a great choice. Kerryon Johnson for the Lions, 19 carries for 158 yards. The team had 248 rushing yards. I mean, how embarrassing is that?
Yeah.
Your guys' D-line was just awful yesterday.
And our secondary couldn't tackle. Our secondary was terrible at tackling.
Speaking of which, 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, that atrocious missed tackle of Golden Tate. Did you see that? Where he was basically down on the ground and the guy had him wrapped up and he just got up and kept running?
I'm sure there were like
one or two more guys that still missed tackle. It was awful. And that to me was the turning play in the game, because it led to a first down, and then the Lions were able to chew more clock off, and then they got the field goal, and it just ended up, 2-score game, and you guys couldn't come back from it. But yeah, I mean, you guys are you're so inconsistent, and home field is supposed to be your advantage. You were 3-0 at home. You lost your home game first home game. That was going to happen. Obviously, you guys weren't going to be 8-0 at home. You're not the Ravens. But I just don't. You guys are almost. I wonder. I keep every week we talk about this. I wonder, is it more frustrating to be a Dolphins fan or a Niners fan right now? Because they're both in kind of dangerous zones, but for different reasons. And I keep going back and forth about which team is in a worse spot. I feel like the Niners are clearly in a rebuild and they've embraced that. But they've had a bunch of second-year players regress. So this is sophomore slump year for them. And losing Garoppolo revealed that the team's roster still has a lot of holes that need to be plugged. You guys, on the other hand, need to enter rebuild mode, but are refusing to acknowledge it and keep having these mediocre performances that put you in bad draft position and just this really middle of the road play that isn't interesting to anybody to watch, first of all. And secondly, it doesn't do anything for you guys. You keep relying on a quarterback that should not be your franchise quarterback. And a defense that needs to be, I think, a good chunk of the defense just needs to get completely retooled. You guys need more offensive pieces. You're so far, but you think you're close. And I don't know which mindset is more dangerous. Like, who would you... Okay, let me ask it this way. Who are you... And feel free to chime in chat. Would you rather be the coach of a team who's now had two drafts in your era that both are pretty weak, and you're scared that those players are not going to develop into who you thought they were going to be, and you've basically wasted 2 years of a rebuild, and they look terrible without their franchise quarterback, so that's one side. Or would you rather be the coach of a team who is relying on a quarterback that isn't good enough to be your franchise quarterback, and half the team needs to be retooled to be competitive? Who
I'd rather be in the Niners situation. If we're talking like this year, obviously, if we go back the past 10 years, certainly Niners have had, you probably had a more enjoyable time as a fan the last 10 years than I have, because having these 7 and 9, 8 and 8 seasons. But this year, I'd still probably prefer to be a Niners fan from that standpoint, because your franchise quarterback is out, and your run game does look solid, and you have pieces, and they're just underperforming right now. But for us, it's a mess. So I think right now it's worse off to be a Dolphins fan.
I just wonder if any heads are going to roll for you guys this year.
Yeah,
we're
going to finish 7 and 9.
I don't know if this is a coaching issue so much as it is a philosophy issue, like with the roster. I think you guys just honestly, the higher ups just need to embrace the rebuild.
Yeah, and we refuse to use our two most explosive players the most, Jakeem Grant and Albert Wilson, more. Devontae Parker has been bad chemistry, and he's made some comments, and he's been, in my mind, a bust since his high. He was drafted pretty high in 2014, and he's been pretty much nothing. Kenny Stills, high talent, but where's he been? He hasn't showed up as much as he should. Danny Amendola has been okay. Our safeties and corners. I mean, the thing is, Rashad Jones really does make big plays at times, but we've mentioned this before. Our secondary is just so inconsistent, and they're inconsistent at the wrong moments, and we give up these big plays. And yeah, once our line gives up on the pass rush, and we're now trying to stop the running game, it's really bad. And once they break that front seven, our secondary don't know how to tackle running backs.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there.
Okay, so let's move on to the Niner game, which, oh man. So there's very, very little that you could possibly point to as good, but as always, I start with the good. I think that this was the lowest week in terms of penalties for the Niners. They only had 2 penalties. There were only 3 accepted penalties for the entire game. The Rams only had 1. So it was from that perspective, it was a clean game. However, In terms of ball security, it was not. So we'll get there under the bad. But the penalties, it was down 2 penalties for 10 yards. I hope we're actually seeing a trend that's getting better. So I hope that actually is a coaching thing that's improving. Ronald Blair is stepping up on the D-line. He had another sack. He's basically what Solomon Thomas is supposed to be. But Solomon Thomas has been a total zero and is failing at getting any kind of pressure on the quarterback. I think he's just maybe being played in the wrong position. I think they need to try to put him on the interior. But Ronald Blair is playing well, and I think they're probably going to keep giving him more snaps as long as that's the case. George Kittle, man, I like George Kittle. He is playing so well right now. He is by far and away the best offensive piece playing right now. He is playing like a top 3 tight end in the league. He has the most yards after catch of anybody, of any tight end in the league right now. He's leading the team in reception yards. He is a bulldozer. He'll get 2 guys, he'll carry 2 guys and have to get tackled by a third. He's very secure with the ball. He makes plays out of nothing. He's a great piece. He was a great low draft pickup from last year. So I continue to hope to see great things from him. He's really fun to watch. In fact, I'd say he's on offense. He's the only piece that I feel confident in. Like when the ball goes and it's going towards number 85, I think this guy's going to make something happen. Whereas I don't think that with any other player on our offense right now. Our running game continues to be pretty good. Even though we had a terrible day overall on offense with the turnovers, we still got 4.5 per carry, still over 100 yards. We have the second best rush offense in the league right now. I think it was second after this week. It might have shifted by 1 or 2, but we're still in the top.
It was third during the game. I think.
Okay, so we're easily in the top 5. I'll say that. Yeah. Top 5 rush offenses in the league. And so that's something that's definitely continuing to improve. And it's was, as predicted, it's one of Shanahan's strengths. He knows how to use multiple running backs and build a really good run game. He did it in Atlanta, and he's doing it here. It is one of his strengths, and I think it's going to continue to be a strength of his team. It just makes you miss Garoppolo, because then we'd also have a passing game, and we'd have an offense that can score 30 points a game and win games. But right now, we have CJ Beathard, who really just likes to confuse the opponent's team's jerseys for our jerseys and throw picks. So here's the bad. The biggest thing, a most alarming thing, is that the Niners have the worst turnover ratio in the league right now. We are minus 15 after 7 games. We have 18 turnovers and only 3 takeaways. And actually, so while I was researching this, I looked at who the best team is, the team with the best turnover ratio.
Oh, hold on.
Do you know who it is? I was gonna quiz you on this to see if you knew this.
I'm gonna say the Chargers or the Saints.
Okay, so neither. It's the Browns.
What?
The Browns have a plus 10 turnover ratio. They lead the league in turnover ratio right now.
That I wouldn't believe that. Wow.
I know. Niners are last. The Browns are first. That's the world that we live in. So I can't describe to you all of the atrocious things that happened in this game, but I can give you a picture on one sequence of plays that give you an idea of what the game was like. Matt Breida carries the ball, is literally while he's falling to the ground, the defensive player strips, I think it was Aaron Donald actually, stripped the ball from him and held it. So it wasn't a fumble. He literally just pulled the ball away and got a turnover. Next, LA scored a touchdown on that turnover, and Jaquiski Tartt dropped the easiest pick six in the universe on that drive.
Yep.
Then we got the ball back after the touchdown. There was a muffed snap, which luckily didn't turn into a turnover. But then there was a sack that led to a blocked punt that turned into a safety. That was obviously the worst sequence in the game, but the whole game felt like that. It was just a bad team playing an ugly day of football. Another example was Witherspoon and Colbert both jump up for a ball. They fight for it for no reason. I mean, I don't know why you let one guy take it, right? They didn't do that. They fought for it like morons. Colbert comes down, injures his leg. He now has a high ankle sprains out for the rest of the season, and Witherspoon doesn't even get the pick. He comes down without the football. It's hard to even describe how I feel like I'm watching high school football. And this last Sunday was a high school football game. In 2016 and large parts of 2015, I felt like I was watching a high school team. Yesterday, I was watching a high school team. This game, I didn't think I would say this at any point in the season, but this game was uglier than the game at Kansas City. Beathard's been terrible. Terrible pocket awareness. He has no idea when pressure's coming. Leads to turnover after turnover. He barely had a 50% completion, a touchdown, 2 picks, 2 fumbles, one of which was lost. The O-line gave up 7 sacks, several of which were late in the game when it was trash time. The Rams' defensive line was still playing like it was the Super Bowl. That is what I'm talking about. I talked about this last week when I was talking about teams when you're behind and you just turn off the faucet because you think you're done. You don't want to get, I don't know what it is. You don't want to get injured. You lose the fire to keep playing, whatever it is. When they're ahead, the Rams knew that they were going to win this game. I mean, in the second half, I bet every player knew they were going to win the game, but they just kept playing like they were behind. And that kind of mindset, I think Aaron Donald got like 2 more sacks in the second half. I mean, they played like they were behind on the last drive when it was the Niners were down 29 points. I mean, why can't our guys play like that? That to me is a coaching thing. It's a coaching thing. When there's a systemic lack of passion to continue playing at your highest level no matter what the scoreboard says. That is a coaching thing, and it's a team leadership thing. I miss when the Niners were dominant in the 2011 to 2013, the 3 years with Harbaugh, 3 straight championship games. Before every single game, you'd see Patrick Willis get all the defensive guys into a huddle, and they would dance. And they would have swagger. And I know you hate that term, Joseph, but they would have swagger. And they would shout. And they would do their cheer. And he would say, these guys are going to kick your butt, but we're going to kick them harder. And we're going to... Rah, rah, rah. Okay? Then they would go out. They would get 3 turnovers. They would win the game by 20 points. They would not even allow a rushing touchdown until the very end of the season. That kind of leadership is missing on this team, specifically on defense. And until I see that come back, I will not believe in the defensive side of the ball for this team. I thought Sherman was going to do some of that, but he's now kind of Uncle Sherman now. He's not the rah-rah Sherman that was in Seattle that did the same thing that Patrick Willis did. He is the Uncle Sherman now. And he's just not that guy, and they need that guy, and they don't have that guy. So I don't know if they need to maybe look at free agency to try to bring in some top level talent, even if it means paying someone a little bit too much to come in and be that leadership figure, because they don't have that and they need it. And they obviously have it on offense. When Garoppolo's healthy, he's that guy, and they can look to the quarterback for the leader, which is what you want. And he's there when he's healthy, right? And they don't have that, and that's too bad, and that's just the way injuries, the way the game goes. But they don't have that guy on defense, and I want to see that guy emerge. And I even see it in the injuries. 49ers are going down on almost every play once things had no hope. Like, you just see a guy go down after down after down. It's just it's rotten apples falling from a tree. And I want to get in there and just start where's the paddle? Just start spanking these guys, because it's not acceptable. It's the kind of mindset that you'd have if you were playing the game and you're 14. So that's enough for me on this. I can't. It's so hard to watch. It's so hard to watch because I don't think it's
really need some commentators say the darndest things right now.
I know we do. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So real quick, some major news from across the league. So the Raiders traded Amari Cooper to Dallas for a first round pick.
They now have 3 first round picks next year.
Yeah, they do. So Raiders keep finding ways to steal number 1 picks from people. I don't think Amari Cooper right now is worth a number 1 pick. I think he's a number 2. Wouldn't you say a second round pick for him,
or maybe even a third round? I mean, but
or like a third and a fifth, or a third and a sixth, or something.
Yeah, but definitely not a first round.
Yeah. So Cardinals are shopping Patrick Peterson. Amongst the top teams that I talked about, I think New England and the Saints, I think, were up there.
Oh, and congratulations to Drew Brees, career touchdown number 500.
Yes, congratulations. Round of applause. Marshawn Lynch is on IR. Is it the rest of the season? Do they think he's gone, or?
I don't know, but it's a groin injury, and those are never fun. So That might be a while.
Okay. Best wishes to him. Hopefully he comes back and at the end of the season gives these guys some reason to play. I wouldn't want to be. I think I would. I don't want to be a Niners fan right now, but I would even less want to be a Raiders fan right now. It's rough. It's rough over there. Okay, so now moving on to our next segment that always lifts our spirits. Commentators say the darndest things. My first quote, actually both of these quotes that I have are brought to you by our beloved Monday Night Football announcers. First quote from our Jason Witten. And I don't know if you knew this, Joseph, but touchdowns matter in this league.
No, I think you need to play a 15-year career to be able to say that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be qualified to say something like that on TV. Right after Odell Beckham went up to grab a ball, he was fouled, came down without the ball. One of the announcers said, if you're Odell Beckham, you're thinking, I deserve that penalty call. I'm one of the best receivers in the NFL.
What? That's it?
Well,
I mean, it's still bad, but
no. So where do people get this idea that just because you're good, you deserve more fouls? It's really rampant in basketball. It's atrocious in the NBA. I don't think it's as bad in the NFL. But there is still that mindset of, oh, if this guy's a really good player, he is going to get the flag more often because he has that mojo with the refs or whatever. And I just think that's stupid. This is the stupidest thing in the world. It's the definition of unfair, and you should never get more or less fouls because you're good. But it was funny that the guy was like reinforcing the concept that players that are good should get more fouls because they're good and for no other reason.
Yeah, that's bad.
Okay, so now we're going to move into our second week of our top 10 series. Last week we did running backs. We covered top 10 running backs of all time and the top 10 running back seasons of all time. And this week we're going to be covering top 10 receivers. So we're going to start, Joseph's going to start us off with the top 10 receiving years of all time. And then I will close us out with the top 10 wide receivers of all time. And as always, we'll walk you through the methodology that we used to determine our list, and then we'll give you our list. So, Joseph, take us away with top 10 wide receiver seasons of all time.
So this one was more difficult and not as fun as running backs. Don't know if you had this similar experience with careers, but certainly was for the
Definitely the more
seasons.
difficult part, for sure.
Yeah, um, because there's just a lot more mediocre seasons scrunched up together for wide receiver. Like at the top, there were like clearly 3 to 5 seasons that were obvious, and it was really easy to get a top 3 to 5. But I had to wade through another 10 to 15 seasons. So we're talking like top 25 here, and really nitpick as to what I thought was better. So um, my first thing was to determine what year I was going to give a cutoff for. For running backs, it was easier because most of the top performers were in the 80s to 90s and 2000s. Whereas for wide receiver, in terms of like yards per game and yards per reception, those numbers were massive early on, like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then the guys have a lot more yards now, but then less yards per reception and touchdown. How do you count for touchdowns? And if the quarterback's good, so I just ignored those for a second, and I really focused on receptions and receiving yards. And then I used yards per reception and catch percentage to kind of fine tune. Now, catch percentage is only valid since 1992 because targets, sorry, haven't been taken into account since then. So I first, wheedled down the list from looking at if they were like in the top 20, whether in receptions or receiving yards. And then after I narrowed it down to like 16, 17 from that, I then reorganized the list of who was best at each stat. So receptions, receiving yards, yards per reception, catch percentage, if applicable, and then touchdowns. Then I took, or sorry, not touchdowns. And then I took the like average score of those in equal weight. So like what was their relative position for all of those, and just took the average, and that was like my base metric, which was pretty good. And then I did a final, I guess, fine tuning of looking at the numbers and making sure they looked right, and comparing. I used touchdowns and yards per reception for extreme cases because there were a few extreme cases. Okay, so with all that said, I have 3 honorary mentions because they were so unique. So let me do my honorary mentions first, in no particular order. Number 1, Mark Clayton, Dolphins wide receiver, 1984.
When you say number 1, you mean number 13, right?
True, yeah. So number 1 honorary, but yeah, I'm gonna give 3 honoraries, but they're all tied for 11th, I guess.
Okay.
So first mentioned honorary, Mark Clayton, 1984, Dolphins wide receiver. It was the year Dan Marino had his breakout second season. He was number 1 in yards per reception, and he had the touchdown record until Jerry Rice broke it several years later. But he was low in receptions and receiving yards, but was a very small guy, played with Marino, was his top guy. So that's one. The next one, people are going to be mad at me at this. Randy Moss, 2007, the year that he broke Jerry Rice's record with 23 touchdowns, and also had a lot of receiving yards. Had a lot of yards per reception, but he was low in receptions comparatively and second to last in yards, only ahead of Mark Clayton, who played in the 80s. And that was the year that Brady went off. And I watched some of those highlights of that year. Like, yeah, Moss was good, but Brady was the one driving that. So even if you got rid of like 6 or 7 touchdowns, Brady still would have had a top 10 season probably of all time. So I'm giving that more to Brady, and that's why. Last one, Wes Welker, 2011 for the Patriots. Very efficient in catch percentage, has 8th most receptions of all time, was low on yards, but I know, knowing Wes Welker and the little dump passes from Brady, he had, I bet if we did yards after the catch, he would be one of the best. Very nimble, very fast, intelligent when he's in the field running. So I give him he still had like 1,500 yards. So I give him a lot of credit for the yards after the catch. That's why it's honorary mention. Okay, here we go. Top 10. Number 10, Randy Moss, 2003. Played for the Vikings. Number 9, Herman Moore, 1995. Number 8, Antonio Brown, 2014. Number 7, Torrey Holt, 2003. Number 6, Antonio Brown again, the only person to show up twice, 2015. Number 5, Isaac Bruce, 1995. Number 4, Marvin Harrison, 2002. And then these first 3, they all could have been number 1. Their average score was very close. They all could have been interchanged.
Can you go ahead and read the stats for the top 3?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I don't have I have them relative to position, not the actual stats. So number 3 is Calvin Johnson, 2012. Number 1 all time in single season yards. 6th all time in receptions. And with this list, he was 3rd in yards per reception. So sorry about that. I didn't track down the numbers themselves.
It's okay. You're fired. I'll get our backup co-host. Our backup long snapper is on deck.
There's a 3rd string long snapper, man.
He's there with the stat sheet, so he deserves to be on the field. No, go ahead.
Number 2, Julio Jones, 2015. 2nd all-time in receptions, 2nd all-time in yards, and was very effective in catch percentage. And then number 1, it's pretty obvious, Jerry Rice, 1995. Just an amazing season. 7th all-time in receptions, 3rd all-time in yards. Relative to this list, 4th in yards per reception and 4th in catch percentage. Also had 15 touchdowns. Just absolutely amazing. And apparently 1995 was the year of the wide receiver because they showed up 3 times in this list alone. And then for my top 20 or 25, there were like 5 seasons. So I don't know what happened in 1995, but it was by far the best wide receiver year, and then probably followed next by 2015. So the top 3 or 4 really easy, but 5 through 20 was incredibly difficult to weed through and narrow down. So I'm hoping you had an easier time than I did.
So now moving on to the top 10 wide receivers of all time. I had a harder time extracting who I should look at, meaning like the pool of the roughly top 20 guys so that I could weed down to the top 10. I had a harder time getting that initial step, but I feel like things fell into line within the top 10 relatively a little bit faster than they did for running back. So I'll go ahead and list my top 10 from number 10 to number 1, and then we'll take a look at the stats because I'm sure that there will be some disagreement. So our number 10 is Lance Allworth. Number 9, Reggie Wayne. Number 8, Andre Johnson. Number 7, Torrey Holt. Number 6, Tim Brown. Number 5, Larry Fitzgerald. Number 4, Marvin Harrison. Number 3, Terrell Owens. Number 2, Randy Moss. And of course, number 1, Doug Baldwin. No. First best wide receiver of all time is easily Jerry Rice.
Oh, are you sure it's not Golden Tate?
I don't know. He was close up there, but he's
yeah.
our phantom second best receiver of all time. Okay, gotcha. So my the statistics I used, the main categories I used were yards per reception, seasons over 1,000 yards, seasons over 1,300 yards. I tried to do 1,500 at first, like I did with running backs, but it ended up making a lot more sense to do 13 because it just cut off too many players.
I've never seen that. I did that. I looked at that as well. And there's more 1,300 yard rushing seasons than receiving seasons. So like a 1,300 receiving season is almost like a 1,500 rushing season.
Exactly. Which why it just made a lot more sense to use 13 instead of 15 for receiving. And then I did years that they were a career leader in total receiving yards. and then looked at Pro Bowls, All Pros, and total touchdowns, and then obviously took this in relative to their total career length. And then, of course, one of the things that looked at this week as well as last week was how compressed the intervals of peak performance were. So was the guy really good for only 4 years? Was he really good for 8 years? Was he like good but not great for 10 years? What was the why, like his summation of stats? How did he get there? Was it out of peak really good performance, or was it out of just more moderate longer term performance? So Michael, by the way, since you did this as well, Michael Irvin and Brandon Marshall both get honorary mentions on this list. I feel like I don't know if they would have necessarily been 11 and 12. There were a couple other guys that would have been close. James Lofton was up there. Chris Carter was up there. There were a couple of other guys that were closer up there. But so I kind of actually want to hit it off with this point to discuss this list, and that is how to use two stats: one, receptions, and two, catch percentage. Now, I know you said catch percentage was only started to be tracked in 1992, so some of these guys you wouldn't even be able to use it for. But let's say even if you could, to me, and I'll want you to give your opinion after I give mine, receptions and catch percentage are both very dependent on quarterback skill. And so I didn't include them in my list because I felt like, I mean, to be fair, all of these stats are definitely interwoven in with quarterback performance as well. But I especially feel like catch percentage is very tied into quarterback skill. Receptions less so. Receptions more just tells you how often did a quarterback want to go to that target. But catch percentages is there could be a lot of overthrown balls. You just don't know. So what are your thoughts on using those two stats in this project that we're doing?
So I agree with the catch percentage. Luckily for your top 7, actually for your top 9, catch percentage could have been used. Jerry Rice misses a few years, but still had enough dominant years in there. So outside of Jerry Rice and Allworth, looks like 80 or guys had all their careers wrapped up after 92, or started and ended after 92. But I do agree that it's very contingent on the quarterback. Receptions, it's one of those stats where it's not going to help out as much if you're in the 80 to 100 reception range, but it's a very clear qualitative stat if you're like the 115 or like the 50 range. It means that if you're in the 50 range, especially during this more modern era, then you're not a worthy wide receiver that your quarterback wants to go to. But if you're getting 110, 120 receptions, especially now, then it's showing that you are good and you're good enough to be thrown to that many times and good enough to catch that many times, almost regardless of your catch percentage, because that is a factor of the quarterback. So the 90 receptions area is really hard to kind of wade through, and that's where you want to look at other stats. But on the extremes, I agree, it does help show who's the best.
So to me, that sounds like you're saying that receptions are a good stat to weed out people that are not in the top 20, for example. It's a way to sort of filter your list, and then you use other stats to rank within that.
Yeah, and I think yards per reception is probably the best one after you get to that.
Yes, I would agree with that, right? Because there's a lot more skill on the receiver's end involved in that.
It sounds like what we're saying, I think we're in agreement. It sounds like what you're saying is to look at approximately the top 20-ish guys in receptions and then use yards per reception to weed that down. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
although, interestingly, though, on my top 10 list, there's actually the average seems to be about 14 yards per reception. And then Lance Allworth, who I actually put as number 10, was a huge outlier at 18.9.
Well, yeah, he played in the 60s, though, right? He used for the Chargers in the 60s, I think.
Yeah, I think it was like 50s, 60s. Yeah, so obviously that's a skewed number for him. But the rest, I mean, the lowest in the top 10 was Larry Fitzgerald is 12.5. And then the highest was Randy Moss at 15.6.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of guys in the low 13s. So yeah, and then if you look at even if you look at some of the other guys that are probably in the top 20, the numbers still are kind of floating around the same area. So that ceases to become a helpful statistic after that as sort of your second phase of weeding out.
Yeah.
I think the seasons over 1,300 and how many of those that you had in a compressed period is maybe the number one most helpful stat in ranking these guys.
I agree with that. I just at it as well, and like trying to find like a prime for all these guys, and like a 6 to 8 year prime, and how many times do they make the Pro Bowl and All Pro in that like 8 year period?
Yeah. So for example, from Jerry Rice down to Lance Allworth, so from 1 to 10, seasons over 1,300 was 7. Randy Moss 6, Terrell Owens 4, Harrison 5, Fitzgerald 4, Brown 4, Holt 6, Johnson 4, Wayne 4, Allworth 3. So everybody had 3 or more. And then if you look at the list of the rest of these guys, everybody that I had on here, everybody had 4 or less. So there was a clear delineation.
Yeah.
And interestingly, so I was mentioning this to you before the show. The one common stat that I used between the two, one of the common stats, was the years that they were the career leader in either rushing yards last week or receiving yards this week. With rushing yards last week, there were actually a lot of every single guy except for Marshall Faulk, who I put it at number 10, had at least 1 year as a career leader, and the average is around 3 or 4. With receivers, though, interestingly, several guys had 0, and a lot of the guys had 2 or less. Jerry Rice had 6, and that was way by far the highest. Randy Moss had none. Terrell Owens had none. Harrison had 2. Fitzgerald had none. Brown had none. Holt had 2. Johnson had 2. Wayne had 1, and Allworth had 3. So I found that kind of interesting. I didn't do a comparison to see, who were the leaders those years. But these guys put up dominant numbers and were still not the number one. I mean, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I wonder if it could be true, right? A coincidence of just during those guys' careers. Because you think about it, Johnson, Fitz, not Harrison necessarily, Owens, Moss, are all kind of playing around a similar era, late 90s to 2000, late 2000s. So I'm wondering if just a coincidence where each year some fluke guy who didn't end up being a great player for more than a year or two led in touchdowns or receiving yards and those things.
Yeah, no, I think that is what happened.
One thing though, so I will say this, I remember just from memory, Brandon Marshall and Wes Welker during that time period, I think led the league in like 6 or 7 times in receptions. So there's your answer for part of that right there.
In receptions or in
receptions.
Yards?
Single season receptions. Marshall and Welker combined have at least 5, if not 6, during that period.
Marshall. Yeah. Okay. So Marshall had 3 years. Oh, sorry. He had 0 years as the career leader in yards, though.
Yeah, and as for reception yards, I don't think Welker was there. I don't know. Josh Gordon gets one of those years. I saw that. Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, Calvin Johnson. He had a 1,600 something year.
And then who else are we missing? Yeah. Michael Irvin, I think, had a year or 2. So Chris Carter had a couple years of leading as well. So somewhere in there, that's where it's getting wrapped up.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it is interesting to look at that, and I also didn't really end up using touchdowns very much. That was another one of those factors that sort of helped to weed out most of the players. But there were actually some guys that had a lot of touchdowns that were pretty clear not guys in the top 10. Like Chris Carter was in the top 20, but for me he wasn't a top 10, but he had 130 touchdowns, which ranks 4th of all time, I think.
Isaac Bruce had, I think, 100 touchdowns or 91 touchdowns.
Yeah, Isaac Bruce had 91. He was 12th all time in touchdowns. Steve Largent had 100. And then guys like Tony Gonzalez had 111, but we agreed we weren't going to do tight ends. So, yeah. So I mean, based on that list, do you have any like strong disagreements with the order or who was in there?
No, in fact, strong disagreements. No, in fact, your top 5 is exactly my top 5.
Okay.
I was wrestling where to put Fitz and Harrison. So Fitz has a little more career stuff, but Harrison had a better prime and a little more yards per reception. I think Harrison just beats him out. But clearly the top 3 are Rice, Moss, and Owens. Moss and Owens may be interchangeable, but Moss does get the edge because of the deep threat he was. Johnson is just sadly underrated. He played with David Carr, guys. You remember how bad David Carr was? Or at least how bad the offensive line was that made David Carr look bad. So the fact that Andre Johnson had all those great years with the Texans when they were a starter team starting in 2004 and still ended up on this list. Just imagine what Andre Johnson would have been if he had, the guys that Moss, Rice, and Harrison had for all those years.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So that's fair, though. Reggie Wayne is fair. I wouldn't be hurt, though, if he got removed for Bruce or Irvin. But yeah, top 5 agree. And then I wanted to add a little bit about just talent. So on careers, I agree, but on talent, who you're going to pick? I think the clear number 1 receiver is going to be Randy Moss. And then Owens is probably 2, and then Rice and Fitzgerald are tied for 3rd.
So how are you distinguishing talent from career performance?
I'm going off of like their speed, their hands, their route running ability. I watched, so a great example of this is I watched a lot of highlights of. I've seen Harrison, all the times he played with, Peyton Manning. Watched a lot of Owens. Seen a good amount of Moss. Went back and watched some Jerry Rice highlights. But there's this one video you need to watch, and you can look it up. It's Randy Moss's touchdowns over 40 yards. It's over 9 minutes long with no replays. And he's double teamed, maybe even triple teamed in some cases. He's by far the greatest deep threat of all time. Just throw it deep to Moss and he'll catch it. He didn't play with the greatest of quarterbacks. He had several years. He had an aging Randall Cunningham. He had an older Jeff George only played for 1 year. He had Culpepper, was okay, but he had, everyone talks about his, season with Brady, which he still helped make Brady. But those years with the Vikings, he's getting massive yards per reception, tons of touchdowns. And it was basically, if you're on the 40 or 50 yard line, you just chuck it up to Randy Moss and he'll catch it for a touchdown. And how effective is that in scoring and winning? So the fact that he has over 9 minutes worth of a YouTube video of, 40 or more yard touchdowns, and the fact that we have the term, you got mossed, right? You just got mossed. I mean, that means something. So I think he is, if his attitude was a little bit better, but it wasn't too bad. It wasn't as bad as Owens. But I think he's probably the most physically gifted and had great hands and great speed. So I'd go with Moss first in terms of talent, and then Owens and Rice are probably tied for second, and then Fitzgerald is definitely, as you could tell, was probably one of the most consistent guys besides Rice. but he was never consistently the best.
Yeah,
You
yeah, I agree.
11 Pro Bowls, but 1 All Pro, whereas like guys like Owens had 6 Pro Bowls, but 5 All Pros. But other than that, yeah, man, your list is, I think it's really good, man. And I'm kind of surprised that our top 5 is the exact same, but I'm glad it is.
Well, it just proves that stats speak, right? Jerry Rice had 13 Pro Bowls and 10 All Pros. Now his career was also 20 years, so he had a longer career than most of these guys by several years. But still, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. He also had 2 top 10 quarterbacks of all time, but
well, that's true. Joe Montana, greatest quarterback of all time. Okay, next segment.
We'll get to that later.
Okay, all right. So I am a 49er fan, and I actually don't think that. So I'm putting that down for the record. I do not think Joe Montana is the greatest quarterback of all time. But we'll do a greatest quarterbacks segment at some point down the line. Okay, so moving on to our next and final segment, our predictions for the week. So Joseph had a hot week this week. He was 12-2 on his picks. I was only 9-5, so he picked up the 3 games that he needed to tie me. So we are now both 64, 42, and 2. And that's a 59% accuracy, which I'd like to work on that. I want to end the season at 65. So we need to pick it up for our second half here. Okay, so game predictions. This week there's 14 games. I'll go ahead and start us off. So game number 1 is Dolphins at Texans. I'm picking Texans.
Same here. They're my sleeper. They've won 4 in a row, and they're at home.
Yep. Eagles at Jaguars.
Eagles.
Yep. Jets at Bears. I'm going Bears.
Same.
Bucks at Bengals.
This one's rough, but I'll go Bengals.
Yeah, it should be. It should not be rough, but it is. Browns at Steelers.
You're going Bengals, I'm assuming? I didn't hear you say Bengals.
Yeah, I'm going Bengals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Browns at Steelers. I'm going Steelers.
Same.
Although that one actually gave me a little bit of pause. Broncos at Chiefs.
Chiefs.
Same. Seahawks at Lions.
So I switched. Oh, you're going first. Sorry, go ahead.
So funny you said that because I switched too. I started with the Lions and then I switched it to the Seahawks.
That's funny because I started with the Seahawks and I switched to the Lions.
Okay, so we're different on that one. That one's an agonized. That's a 50-50 for me.
I wish the Seahawks were home. I wish the Seahawks were home on that one. That'd be easier.
Yeah, if you're on ESPN Eliminator, don't touch this game with a 10-foot pole. Redskins at Giants.
Redskins.
Same. Ravens at Panthers. I picked Panthers by a hair.
Same here, man. Just barely picked Panthers.
Yeah, Cam Newton had a good game this week. Colts at Raiders.
Raiders.
Oh, okay. I picked Colts.
But I won't be shocked. I won't be shocked.
Okay.
Hold on here. Hold on. When does Amari Cooper get left? Because I made this pick before Amari Cooper.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's already been traded, right? So he's not going to play this week for the Raiders.
I'll stick with the Raiders.
Okay.
I want to change my pick.
Packers at Rams. Whose turn is it? Is it mine?
It is your turn.
Whatever. I'll just go. Packers at Rams. Rams.
Rams.
49ers at Cardinals.
Talk about least pick of the week, man.
I know. Most irrelevant game of the week.
Or maybe the year. I'm going Niners though.
Okay, I'm actually going Cardinals. So,
but it was tough. It was a hair.
Yeah. The lack of defensive mojo is they don't deserve my pick this week. So, I'm going Cardinals. Saints at Vikings. I'm going Vikings.
Same here.
Okay. That's another tough one. Patriots at Bills.
Patriots.
Same. Okay, so we only differed on 1, 2, 3 games.
Okay.
Seahawks, Lions, Colts, Raiders, Niners, Cardinals. Buys, Falcons, Cowboys, Titans, and Chargers are all on buys this week. I guess Dolphins at Texans is Thursday night. And then I guess that means Saints at Vikings is Sunday night and Patriots at Bills is Monday night. So my game of the week this upcoming week is Packers at Rams.
So I was thinking that, but I'm going Saints Vikings.
Okay, that's another equally good one in my opinion.
What made you? I'll give my reasoning for why I picked mine, and then I want to know why you picked that one instead of the Saints. So I pick in Saints Vikings because I think that's the clear game for the second bye seed of the NFC. Whereas if it was Rams at Packers, then maybe. But since the Packers are on the road, I think that kind of got rid of their credibility for that.
So it got rid of their credibility. I like that. So a similar thing happened to me with the Saints, though. The Saints don't play as well on the road, and they're playing the Vikings. So it didn't bring it down quite as much as Packers at Rams did, but it brought it down a bunch. So I just want to see what Aaron Rodgers can do against the Rams at home. But I like I said, I think these are 50-50 for me, basically. Like I could have picked either one.
We've had a lot of Rams games that we've.
Okay, so then if you want, yeah, if it's 50-50 for me and you're picking the Saints, we're officially going to go with Saints at Vikings for our game of the week.
Okay, to discuss.
I'm making the call. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so next
Sunday
night.
We've discussed like 3 Rams games already.
Have we really 3 games already?
I know it's been at least 2. I'm pretty sure it's been at least 2.
We did the Rams-Vikings game. I know we did that. Yeah. Maybe we did another one earlier. Oh, we did Rams-Seahawks too. Yeah, that would have been our 3rd. You're right. We got it late at least one more week before we pick the Rams again.
Well, there's also still the Rams-Chiefs game coming up, so
we're going to save it for that then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed tonight's episode or any of our past episodes, please like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. It is only one click of the mouse, as those are free ways for you to support our show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at The Practice Squad and at Neuralizer_. Just as a reminder, if you've missed past episodes, you can watch or listen to them right here on my YouTube channel. I typically upload on Tuesday evenings, the day after we go live. As always, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Peace out.